Here we go, this is going to be fun. This is a Millburn, the closed Inverness distillery, bottled by Samaroli. Millburn, not a whiskey you've had too much before, I imagine?
At all.
Yeah,
there's a number of closed distilleries where I've been lucky enough to get a dram here or there, but this is one that's completely evaded me.
Yeah, it's certainly very, very rare. So Millburn was one of three Invernessian distilleries which closed in the 1980s. Obviously nowadays, when the rise of whiskey collecting and whiskey investment, any closed distillery has become quite sought after. Obviously you've got your big names like Port Ellen and Brora, which are very, very expensive and very popular. Millburn is definitely a league below, or maybe even 2 leagues below that. But it's, being able to try something like this is great because it's super, super rare. You don't see it in bars. It just doesn't really exist anymore.
And I think especially that, something that's been bottled by Samaroli as well, that name carries its own weight and significance. So there's an added level of expectation going into this.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those who don't know, Samaroli is an Italian independent bottler that bottled some incredible whiskies in kind of 1980s and 1990s. In that day and age, whiskey wasn't as sought after as it is today. So Silvano Samaroli was able to visit all these distilleries in Scotland, try all the casks and pick his favourites, basically.
Not a bad job, eh?
Not a bad job. And fortunately, Silvano also had an exceptional palate. So he was able to pick the very finest whiskies. So anything with Samaroli on it, even modern day bottlings after Mr. Samaroli has passed away, the standard and the quality they maintain is second to none. So even though Millburn's very obscure, even though this is only, 11 years old, there's a good chance the distillery closed because the whiskey wasn't that exciting. Because it's Samaroli, it could be knockout, potentially. So, great opportunity to try this. Again, we've said before, distilleries we aren't familiar with. It's a nice opportunity to try something without any preconceptions.
Yeah, I think that's what I find quite exciting about this bottle in particular is I have no frame of reference. You said it's, an Invernessian, a northern distillery, but that's not an area known for having a particular flavour profile in the same way as Islay, Campbelltown are. Yeah. So it's an intriguing prospect.
Yeah, I think I've had maybe 1 or 2 Glenvores, which was one of the other Inverness ones. Glenalbin, I don't think I've had any of, but I think the fact that they're not as fetishised as some others suggests that they're maybe not as big in terms of flavour profile, but all we can do is open it up and see what you think. So let's give this a try. Nice screw cap, which I don't actually mind these days. Although this has got a weird, what is that?
There's like a plastic seal on top of that.
I mean, that is not a mark of quality, is it? At least there's no crumbly corks, so I'm quite grateful.
Yeah, it's always the risk when you get a bottle from 30 plus years ago. The cork's gone to ruin.
We've had so many nightmares of corks that have just turned to scrambled egg in the neck of the bottle. So don't mind a cheap feeling screw cap at all.
So you said it was about 11 years old.
So this one, it was distilled 1970. Interestingly, this says pure malt, which, I assume it is single malt. If it says Millburn on it, surely it's 100% Millburn. Pure malt, obviously these days, generally refers to like a blended malt. So different single malts, different distilleries. But I think it's always been a loose term, pure malt, which I think is why it's been phased out. Nobody really knew what it meant.
Yeah, it's quite, I suppose it's a bottle from before any legislation came in to sort of make these terms sort of a bit more concrete.
Kind of an innocent time in the early 80s.
or the Wild West, depending on how you look at it.
Definitely. This one, we'll give it a quick nose. It's quite vibrant. It's quite nice. Quite fresh, I would say. I think with bottles like this, obviously this was bottled 1981, like it's been in there a long time until 30 seconds ago when we opened it. And I think maybe it shows why screw caps are great, because they do keep the whiskey fresh inside.
Yeah, I think people tend to prefer corks, but no, I think you're right, it's done a good job. There's nothing about this that makes me think it's kind of gone off. It's been, slightly open for decades.
Yeah, I think whiskies from decades ago often they do have quite like a dusty feel to it, like a dusty aroma. Is that something you're picking up on this, or is it still quite fresh?
Not particularly. I'd probably double what you said about the sort of vibrancy. There's a kind of almost floral quality to it. Not quite cut grass, but there's something about it that's almost triggering my hay fever.
Yeah, no smoke that I'm picking up on this one. I assume it's unpeated, but I don't know. I think this aroma of older bottlings isn't something that's replicated too much in modern day whiskies. So it does smell old. I think it has got depth to it. It's quite an intriguing aroma for me. Is it quite inviting, do you think? Is it one you're keen to taste?
Yeah, definitely. I think when I went back for just another sip there, that sort of floral, kind of grassy notes kind of been replaced by something a bit more, I don't know, say substantial maybe. Okay. I can't quite tell if it's like a meatiness or salinity.
Sure.
It's not like a full-blown sweetness, and as you said, it's not peaty, it's not smoky. Kind of intangible to me right now.
Yeah, it smells, it's got an interesting aroma. It smells a little bit thin, I think. I'm not expecting this to, change my life, but it's got aromas of a kind of well-integrated single malt. So looking forward to trying this.
Yep,
cheers.
Again. Wait, what's your first thought on this?
I don't know, I'm kind of a little bit underwhelmed. I think my suspicion with this is that, having not had any Millburns before, and having not heard many people talk about Millburn, is that it's not really got a distinctive distillery character or distillery DNA. Yeah. And I think from tasting that, this is 11 years old, there's not going to be a huge amount of cask influence. It's been bottled at 45%, I think, 46%, sorry. So it has been watered down a little bit, but not so much that it's going to drown all distillery character.
Yeah.
So it's pleasant, but maybe a little bit flat for me. The finish sort of disappears quite quick too.
Yeah, it's quite funny you saying that. I feel sort of reassured in my opinion, because my first thought was this kind of just tastes like whiskey. There's nothing really jumping out. Not that that's a bad thing. You could probably sit and dram this all night if you really wanted to, if you were that way inclined. But yeah, in terms of like an outstanding character or characteristic, I don't really think there is one, at least not immediately.
No, there's not a huge amount jumping out. I think it is balanced, it is pleasant. For me, there's not too many kind of off notes. It's reminiscent for me of kind of older style blends as well. So I've had, like some White Horse from the 50s or Teachers from the 70s, which again are very well integrated, very pleasant, and they have got some depth. But comparing that to sort of modern day blends, which are very sort of smooth and very clinical and sort of lacking that dirtiness, this has got that slight rough around the edges feel to it. So it's pleasant.
Yeah,
I would say.
I know it maybe feels like we were being a bit harsh if there's nothing outstanding. It's just a bit like whiskey. It is nice. It is very drinkable. But yeah, I'm struggling to find like a sort of specific kind of tasting note. Something to say out that would sort of sell it to everyone to make it relatable. It's just it's fine, I suppose.
Yeah, it's quite dry. But it's pleasant. Probably not Silvano Samaroli's finest moment, but it's a good whiskey. Probably a good example of what Millburn's all about as well, which isn't really anything distinctive. So, would you revisit it if somebody offered you a dram?
Yeah, it's not enough to put me off the Millburn name, and it's not tarnished Samaroli's reputation for me, but it also hasn't changed my world. I'm not going to run out and buy every bottle of Millburn I can find at auctions.
Particularly not for £1,000 a bottle or whatever it is. So yeah, nice one to try. Hopefully next Millburn will change your lives.
Cheers.